toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. Well, welcome everyone. This is the first of a 6-week series called the Imaginal Faculty. And just briefly in the description of this, we're going to help you discover how to develop a facility to download revealed wisdom, enhance your human divine relationship, increase the coherence of your identity in all the realms, and establish your own unique creative ability.
So we could have said that this is a class on the imagination, but we said Imaginal Faculty because we wanted to give more of a feeling of it's a capability that we can develop and use. Like being able to concentrate, or it's an ability that we can perfect. We can interpret what we call reality using our imaginal faculty, our imagination. We've been using it all the time, and not only in creating art and creating music, really even perceiving things in our world, interpreting what they are, and seeing them in different depths also, like what is behind what we usually see as a bird, and what kind of message comes to us through that bird. We perceive things, but we can learn to listen better. It's a faculty of consciousness which can radically alter not only how we feel about things and beings, but how we all relate to the world and how we relate to each other. What wisdom is revealed by little things, by little beings, by instances in the world. How consciousness within us is in play with consciousness outside of us also. So would you like to add some to that?
Yes. So in spirituality, we often talk about it's a way of helping us to come to higher states of consciousness. And many physicists are saying that the most fundamental thing in the universe is actually consciousness, more fundamental than energy or matter. So a dualistic way of thinking about this is we're just going to take our usual consciousness and learn how to move it into a different state of consciousness, then come back here and have a description in our own minds or that we share with others about what we've experienced. But throughout all the classes, for those of you who have been in on them, especially the previous series, which was called the Gabrielite Work, a Relational Approach to Spirituality, we've talked about, again, what scientists are saying, as well as the mystics, that everything is interconnected, everything is in a state of relationship with each other. So we can't really understand consciousness by thinking of it as something separate or trying to get to different aspects of it that are not connected with who we are. But we can learn how to, what we like to say is modulate our consciousness. We can direct our consciousness to different vibrational states of being, which is another way of describing different subtle realms of existence. And this is a learned skill that I would say is an essential one in the process of awakening. So I'd like to just briefly talk about, there's different degrees of capacity of working with this, what we're calling the imaginal faculty. And the first is having a way to be able to experience a subtler realm of existence, like the angelic realm or the realm of pure spirit. We've talked before about we are multidimensional beings and awakening a multidimensional state of consciousness. But we can't just jump into that. So what's our launching point? We can use images. which we've shared in the past, we'll be sharing again. Metaphors. For me, ideas from science are good launching places, but something that kind of gives us an impetus to be able to experience a higher level of reality. So that's number one. Number two is once we become capable of doing that, being able to understand what we've experienced. Because many times what happens when people are on their spiritual journey and they're get into a higher state of consciousness, they blank out. They maybe have a memory of being in a very wonderful, very blissful sort of state, but it's an undifferentiated state and it's not really connected to their day-to-day experience. So the second stage of working with the imaginal faculty is developing a capacity for a connection between our usual sense of identity and manifestation and with the state of consciousness that we've become capable of experiencing, and being able to experience those as just different aspects of the unity of who we are. And then one more, and we'll be going back into these, I just wanted to highlight them. And the third, which we have referred to in the description of this series, being able to participate in the human divine co-creative process. So we can consciously come to what we've called the meeting place, and we'll be describing this because some of you are new to our classes. The meeting place is called the Barzakh, B-A-R-Z-A-K-H. It's kind of an intermediate interface between usual manifestation and transcendent realms, where there can be a relationship, a connection between the subtle and the manifest. So this third stage is being able to actively participate in this creative process.
Yeah, so in order to activate that process that he's speaking about right now, which we have called in the other classes the new creation. And this is a creation that is born at every instant, the Sufis say. We say in this way of thinking that rather than having had a creation way back when, and we have really nothing much to do with that creation, we now have been a participant that's added on after many, 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 many years. So we're refined down to this little bitty bit of a person here in this one little part of time. No, the Sufis say that we can participate in that moment of time. That's a recurrent creation all the time. And it takes our activation of this imagination or the imaginal faculty in order for us to do that. But if we do not awaken to this capacity, what we'll experience will be a repetition of what has been, a projection forward in time, which is a linear continuation of what we expect to happen. Hazrat Inayat Khan speaks of changing from being a machine, part of a machine, like for example of a train. If you want to be just part of that train, that's one thing, but how about being the engineer of the train? The engineer of all of creation. That's one ultimate calling of the imagination. When we've worked with it, and as Zervash said, in the Barzakh, in this place where the subtle and the manifest meet, it's as if things had been woven together from both the manifest and the divine parts of our being. The expression of this is what becomes tangible. You have a different way of discussing it, I love.
Yes, so these are some thoughts that just came to me today, but let me kind of give an intro to this. So if you're familiar with a hologram, the way a hologram is made is you have an object and then you have a light that's shined on the object and it's reflected onto a photographic plate. So there's an interference pattern between that light and the object. And then there's the original reference beam that doesn't shine on the object. And when you put those together, you get the hologram, which you can see what the whole object looks like. So I remembered an amazing experiment that's been done in physics, where they can take some photons that are entangled with each other. They're in a particular relationship where one part always has to be the same in terms of its relation with the other part. And let's say you have an object hidden in a box. And so they split a beam of light, and they have some of the light go towards that box, but it never gets to go into that box. And the other light just goes around to something that records it. Well, one of the peculiarities of quantum physics is that because it was possible that that light that went towards the box could have gone into the box and generated an interference pattern, but it never did. No light ever entered that box. The change in the other light that had nothing to do with that box has the information from the other one, and you can actually see what's in that box, even though nothing ever passed through that box. So that doesn't blow your mind. I don't know what does. Basically, it's better than Superman's X-ray vision, because that has to penetrate the object it's looking at. This is nothing ever touches it, but you can tell what's inside of it. So this spearheaded some thoughts that I've had today that I'll share with you. Even Arby says that the purpose of creation was that God was a hidden treasure desiring to be known, and God could only be known through the relationship with created beings. God could know of him herself only through the connection with beings in manifestation. So he says God confers upon the human a mode of being, and the human confers upon God a mode of knowing. So what I started thinking about is that the Zohar, which is the mystical writings of Judaism, says that in the beginning there was nothing but an infinite, undifferentiated ocean of pure light. And out of that light, the divine hollowed out a vacuum, and through that vacuum, a shaft of light descended, and that light became the light that formed the substance of all the realms of existence, all the way down to physical existence. Okay, so here's what came to me today. So think of this light that descends as like the reference light of the hologram. God's launched this light forth out of a desire to know him herself. But how does God know him herself? Well, through the relationship with the beings in existence. But how does that take place? The beings in existence, what happens is that they're not only made of that light, but every being transforms that light through their experience, and there's a light that's returned back to the divine. And that light is the result of, you could say, an interference pattern of the original divine light and the light of the beings in existence interacting with whatever they've interacted with. So the divine, even Arby says, the divine can never incarnate directly. God can't just launch down and manifest in physical manifestation, but God can know of him herself through the interference pattern of how the light that was descending has been changed by the light that returns. And in this way, God knows of her own being. Okay, what does that have to do with us as individuals? Well, we are beings of light, and whenever we're able to enter into a deeper way of relationship with whatever we're experiencing, there's a circulation of light between us. Let's say it's another person that we're having a wonderful conversation with, and we've all probably felt this. After a certain point, something clicks, and each of you begins to have ideas that you never would have had separate. And it's not just a summation of your idea and their idea. It's the Sufis say it's a light upon a light, and they also say a third presence arises. So in a sense, it's the interference pattern of the light of you and what you're experiencing that generates this light out of which new wisdom can arise. And so this is a way of thinking about this process of the new creation is made possible by our coming to this meeting place in the interface, the Barzakh, all the returning light that we bring, and it's meeting the light of the divine being, and it's what transpires from those lights coming together that enables the new creation to take place.
So if you're a little confused, that's okay. We get very excited about all the ways we think and all the ideas that we've come up with, and we just can't help but put them all out there at once. But tonight is really a night for seeing kind of what the range is and the possibilities of our discussion. But we'll take lots of time to really get into each one of these, do practices so that it becomes more of a reality. Maybe you can experience right now the interference pattern, it's called, but it's like a dance of the light upon the light. There's a little twinkling and a shimmering and a moving of this energy among us and between us. And we somehow think that we're the faces on the screen, but we're not. We're really the shimmering light that's happening between us. And when we can relax into that and just know that that is us more than what we see, that's how we're using our imagination right now. If you're getting into that kind of a feeling, that imaginal capacity, what do we call it? I keep changing faculty. I'm trying to keep on that one instead of keep changing it. And I wanted to say too about that we're often caught up in our emotions that we can't relate to what's going on. We've had a very difficult year that we're just kind of coming to the end of here. And not only in that time, but when we feel that, creation is, we are a little bit of creation, as we said before, then if we think of ourselves as an item in creation, was a quote from our book here. If we think of ourselves as an item in creation rather than thinking of the true imagination that can change the entire universe, well, of course we're going to feel out of sorts. We don't find our place in this whole thing. And we can't be just like a little bit on a gear that goes around and around in a machine kind of world. That's not what the world is about. And we know some of that through the spiritual readings, understandings, sharings. But to realize this in our own being such that we can take part in it, that we can participate in it, is a whole other kind of thing. And so we have a practice to work with. Is there anything you'd like to add before we do the practice?
Just a brief comment that imagination, oftentimes the way we think of it and the way we experience it, it's like the way our thoughts typically are. So if you were to be able to write fast enough to write down all the thoughts that go through your head in a 5-minute period, and you show that to someone else, they'd probably wonder about you, because our minds tend to jump around from this to that, to this to that. And imagination, if it's not directed in the way the Sufis talk about as a creative imagination or true imagination, can easily just spin off into fantasy that has nothing to do about what we're going to be talking about in this series. So imagination is not just letting whatever pop up in your mind or just being influenced by external things that trigger off more images in your mind. It's a conscious direction of consciousness for a specific purpose that enables us to break free from our usual limited way of perceiving.
Mm-hmm. So there's a practice called Ya Khalik. I want to say, first of all, some of us might not be familiar with doing the practice with the divine names, but there are many names of the divine. This is coming from the Sufi tradition. And each one has to do with a different quality of existence. And this particular one is about the creation, the creator. Khalik means creator. It's spelled Khaliq. And it's from the Arabic, and the sound has a kind of glottal sound at the beginning, khalik. And the Q at the end It's kind of like a K, but it's a little bit farther down in the throat. If you say it just like the other one, that would be just fine. Also, the beginning sound ya is a greeting. And the idea is that we're greeting the creator, or really the creator part of all, which includes us. We're greeting that aspect of the creation, you could say. And the ya part is like oh or hail. And we're thinking of that we are beings, and then there's this being, and that we're trying to find that meeting between the two, maybe the interference pattern of the two aspects of creation here, as we say, Ya Khalik. There's a quote about Khalik here. The mystic, this is from Hazrat Inayat Khan, the mystic who realizes the creator within himself thinks that his dream is the creator's dream. If the creator's dream is all this which we call reality, then the dream of the mystic is the same. So he again is saying that you are part of the creative power of the universe. And this is for us to realize with our imaginations, with this imaginal faculty, what exactly does that entail? Part of it is to find a way to enter in. Sometimes people say, act as if you do, act as if you know, open to it, be surprised, feel like perhaps there's something that I missed. Maybe I was seeing things in a limited way. I'm going to be open to this and see what happens. So there is something to the sound of the words also, to the divine names. There's many reasons why. For one thing, many beings have said these words before. Many evolved beings throughout time. So in a way, it opens you out into time. And then there's the meaning of it, thinking of being part of this creation process that is recurrent creation, and allowing ourselves to possibly entertain that we could be part of that creative process. We could see this, that the dream of the mystic, the dream of all of you, is the same as this dream that we call reality. They are not two separate things. Okay, so now saying the divine name, we repeat the divine name. We think the thoughts that I gave you, of the creator and entering in as the creator. But then we kind of open it out into what else could come from that. Sometimes thoughts from what you would think of as creator. Sometimes it might be the light that Azarbash was speaking about before. Who knows what it might be? This is opening it up to the imagination. This is part of the practice. So we'll say these together. I'm going to say 3 times, and then I'll invite you to say it. So again, it's Ya Khalik. And as you say it, you think creator. So I'll begin. Ya Khalik. Ya Khalik. Ya Khalik. Join me now. Ya Khalik. 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 One more. Ya Khalik. Now this next part of the practice, you just think the word Khalik, and you don't use the ya part because it's internal. As you exhale, you'll be thinking the word Khalik, and think of that impulse of creation at every instant. And then as you inhale, you just inhale. So again, it's like being the creation itself. Each time that you exhale, the world is made differently. So let's breathe at your own pace, and I'll do this. Let's do this for a while together. Silently thinking Khalik. Let's pause for a moment. So you're going to continue, but every time you exhale, think that the uniqueness of your own being is influencing everything that's happening in creation each time that we exhale. That there's transmission that's happening that goes really both ways, but you're especially feeling that you are giving of yourself. You're giving of your realization. You're giving of your light. You're giving of what you have acquired in life. Let's say a blessing upon the whole world. And let's continue. You just breathe in regular breath. Once you exhale, you think Khalik silently on the breath. Now, as you continue, you just drop the word itself and just feel the feeling of what has come up in the meditation. Just feeling this recurrent creation. Amen.
So we will be sharing many different tools, we could say, to help us work with the Imaginal Faculty. And certainly one very powerful one is working with the divine names, which have to do with the different divine qualities. So in line with what I was sharing earlier, and I'll just give a mention now because we'll come back to this in later classes in more depth. We can think of each of the divine qualities, whether it's compassion or beauty or so on. And actually these qualities are usually described in terms of working with the light of compassion, the light of truth, the light of wisdom, and so on. So imagine now that each of these qualities is a particular reference frequency for the divine being to experience him herself through means of that quality. So if it's beauty, the divine comes to know of its own being through the way the light of beauty is experienced and transformed by anything in existence that is experiencing that beauty. So whenever we make a connection with something through beauty, and this is easy to do if we're in a wonderful place in nature, a forest, by the ocean, Grand Canyon, Yosemite, someplace like that, it's just almost automatic. We open up to a very deeper connection of reality through the divine beauty. Well, something has changed in that light of divine beauty by our experience, our relationship with it. And now the divine knows of him herself more through the quality of beauty, and vice versa. We know more of reality. We know more of the divine being through the means of beauty. It's the way that that connection takes place. So we can use tools like this. We can use the different qualities. And as I mentioned earlier, we almost always start with kind of a basic way of thinking or launching the practice. So in this practice that Rabani Ra just shared, we might just start by thinking about ways that we are creative or have been creative. And that's great. That gets us into the feeling of what that divine creativity is about. But then if we do what she is suggesting and we just open up to something deeper that's coming through, working with that quality, establishing that relationship with the divine through the modality of the creative process, then we're opened up to a richer dimension of reality. So, what are some essential elements to be able to unfold this imagination faculty that we have? Well, one is that we have to be able to let go of a previous state of experiencing. We start with one, we have images, we have concepts, we may have emotions about what we're experiencing, and we need something to start to make that connection, but then we just set forth an intention that we would like to open to a deeper understanding, and we don't know what's going to come through, because by definition it's going to be something more than what could fit into our previous way of understanding things. So we have to be willing to and able to let go of that previous vantage point, be in that in-between state in which a reorganization can take place in our capacity for consciousness to be able to experience that deeper reality. So that is a very important ingredient. And then related to that is, let's say we've done those two things. We've launched it, we've let go of the previous way of thinking about things, and now we've opened up into a deeper experience of reality. What our tendency is to step back into our usual state of consciousness and give a running commentary on what we're experiencing. This is so beautiful. This is like so-and-so. Oh, I am experiencing such and such. But as soon as we do that, we're separating ourselves from that experience. And in physics, there's a term of collapsing the quantum wave function, forcing light that has both a wave and particle potentiality to behave as just one or the other by our active observation. So it's definitely a learned skill to hang out in that space of higher consciousness, more subtle vibration, however you want to describe it, and not collapse it back down by putting it into the conceptual way of thinking about things.
So that collapsing back down refers to getting back to the truncated experience of reality. It's one way we talk about it. Truncated like a tree, cut to the trunk that doesn't experience all of its branchings. Or it would be like us without all the other realms that feed us, all the other parts of existence that we are connected to. And as he said that, another aspect that I'd like to bring in is the heart. How are we pulled into the dance? How are we pulled into the communication with the rest of existence? Is through our own hearts, through our own desires. And our desires are sacred. They're so special. Well, it is God's desire that created the whole universe. And that first story, at least, of the universe. And each time that we affect the whole universe, it is through our own desire. And our desires become more and more refined and more grand and cosmic as we incorporate more of the realms of existence and experience on many different levels. But it's always that, and a word for this also of realizing those desires is himma in the Sufi tradition, Himma. You can look that up through anything you have in Ibn Arabi, a wonderful teacher from about 1000 that put into organization some of the thoughts of the Sufis in those days who themselves had been blessed by the learnings from the Zoroastrian tradition, a tradition of light and a tradition of angels and a tradition of transformation. So these are great jewels of inheritance that we have. But they speak of Hima as a power that creates, the power that that links us in this relationship, like you were speaking about before, and not coming from one individual to try to create something. That kind of creation is never going to really do very much. But it is a training ground. But the true creation happens as we cycle through, and you have interference pattern, you can call it. And I was thinking of the ripples that happen from one side to the other side. And that side could be in nature. It's a really wonderful example of it, where we feel the breeze and we see the trees and all the leaves moving and the birds moving and the feathers moving. And we're caught up in the whole feeling of unity that is there. You can't deny it. And then in that kind of feeling, the creation happens. Ideas come, feelings to do some beautiful things and change some people in different ways, and love people and just contribute everything that you have, such that what we say is that what happens in these processes is the transformation itself is an essence. And this kind of essence is eternal. Well, we just finished speaking about the resurrection body in some classes that we've been doing together with some of you guys. And that has to do with the realizations of yours, the illuminations, the moments of understanding. These things are eternal. These things don't stop with the dropping of the body. And that is what we speak of as the resurrection body. And it's a wonderful example, too, of an interference pattern of everything that happens in our lives. But it's also a wonderful thought for us to think that all these things, I was a teacher, and there's all the kids that come in the door and they go out the door at the end of the semester, and you think about, well, what happened? You know, is anything left from that? I mean, they seem to be in bad moods half the time, and I don't know if I taught them anything. But it's wonderful to think, and also with kids or with projects you've done, that what is eternal is this elixir that happens in the effort, in the love, in the contribution, in the light that comes. These things look like nothing to this kind of eye, but they say that there's something called the eye of the world beyond. And that eye does see that these things keep going. These things grow, and these things echo back and forth in this positive process of creation.
So talking about the things that endure, I was talking earlier about how a hologram works and how you can see the object that the hologram came from when you put the reference light with the light of the interference. But what we're talking about here, that divine light that descends and the light that returns, that is the interference pattern of what happens to that light, or what's gained by the wisdom of life's experiences, those two coming together are not just like restoring a hologram of something that's been pre-existent, that was already there. They're actually bringing about the new creation that happens at every instant. So that's the kind of the lifeblood that enables this recurrent creation process to take place. It's birthing something that could only come through these two coming together, and we can become capable of consciously participating in that. So let's come back to ways we can use the creative imagination. As Ravani Rao was talking about Ibn Arabi and kind of integrating the teachings of the Sufis of his time, but also drawing on the wisdom of the Zoroastrians. And different spiritual traditions always talk about a transmission associated with a particular tradition. So there's the transmission of Buddhism. There's transmissions of different schools of Sufism. You could say there's transmissions of mystical schools of Judaism and Christianity and so on. And someone who is a follower of one of those particular schools can learn how to tap into that transmission. So it's like, well, okay, I want to make available to me this wisdom that we think of as like from the past. It's like this stream of wisdom, which is wonderful. There's plenty in that ocean. But what we may come to realize is that the reason that we're here, the reason that the divine being created all these unique souls instead of just copies of the same one over and over again. It'd be a lot easier to have a factory that just turns out one thing instead of everything is different than the one before. Everything is custom made, because there's something that each of us can bring forth through, you again come to this metaphor of the interference pattern, the way the light of our being interacts with the light of whatever it is that we experience, and that is returned to the divine, it's returned to the totality, and now that enables something to emerge in this process of Hima that Ravani Rao was talking about, which Ibn Arabi describes as the creative power of the heart that can only come through us. And it comes through that which is the deepest longing of our being, and it could be the passion for expression of our being through, it could be through any of the creative modalities, but it could be through science, it could be through philosophy, it could be through business, it could be through so many things, but it's the expression of what's called our dharma, our duty, the reason why we're here, that we're here to fulfill, to bring something about. So we can use this faculty of imagination to first just tap into this stream of transmission, but then also to begin to have a new worldview and a view of what our spirituality is about, that isn't seeing ourselves as kind of just, we only have available to us the wisdom that's been, but realizing that that wisdom is continually in a process of evolution through every being who's engaged in the process of their own awakening, and what we can contribute to that. So one more comment I want to make, and we'll definitely come back to this one. Those of you who were in previous classes, we've talked about how research has been done on subtle energy to show that it changes ordinary reality, and now new things are possible. Well, again, this is a thought that just occurred to me today. I hadn't really thought of before. That's all true and amazing, but also this returning light that comes from us is bringing about a transformation, you could say, in the properties or qualities of the divine being. It's not just that what comes down from these subtle levels is opening up the world to a richer level of experience. What comes back from manifestation to the divine being is having the same function for the divine being. So it's this mutual process of transformation that we're engaged in.
So what we've been doing tonight has been an exercise for your imaginal faculty. You know, think in this way, think in this way, in this other way, and think in this third way. And then think of what you were thinking about before and kind of modify it in some ways about new ideas. You know, these are about new ideas. And then it's up to you to live into some of these ideas. Try them on, try the practices that are given. And Pir Vilayat, our teacher in the Sufi order for many years, used to have us challenge our perspective. That used to be, that's the thing I remember the most about Pir Vilayat saying, challenge your perspective. maybe you can see it a different way. Because usually he would also say things like, in his own words, this is my interpretation, that the problem really is the way of seeing things. The problems come in a restricted way of seeing things rather than what is really happening. You know, what we see, we interpret. There's a wonderful word in the Sufi tradition, Tawil, Tawil, that we've spoken about many times in our past classes. And it has to do with seeing the meaning behind the meaning that we know. So seeing what is deeper. Sometimes it's said you can see all the realms through which this thing came in order to be what it is. But it doesn't have to be really quite that regimented. It could just mean what is announcing itself. We love to speak about Gabriel, actually, and we say that everything is Gabriel. Everything is announcing itself. So if we've been stuck in a certain way of interpreting, maybe we can inch it open a little bit and think, well, like, let's say that, how would a Navajo speak about this? How would a person in a whole different culture than myself see the sun or feel the rain or relate to other people? What would they feel about that? Just pushing the boundaries a bit. It's a wonderful working of our imaginations. So yes, it's not just saying the practices, doing the practices, being faithful about doing the practices twice a day or something. It's questioning our view of reality. And the most often used type of imagination, what do we do the most time with our imagination? We imagine the same thing as we did yesterday. We reimagine everything day to day. I'm sorry to say that we do this all the time, and there's a comfort to that. I think lately it's been kind of difficult to find the same thing every day, but we would like that security of everything. So we don't have to erase everything, but we can open the door in different ways and let something come in that's going to change everything.
So this term Tawil, it's also described as harmonic perception. And it could be sitting with a flower and then there's a revelation that opens up in our way of connecting. And those of you who were in on the previous series, we talked about something called relational unity, a way of experiencing something else in which we're not separated from it, but our identity is not dissolved into it. We just don't blank out. It's in an in-between state where there is this circulation of light between what we're experiencing, both ways. And there's this dynamism. So Tawil, at the first level, you could say would be just being able to perceive the deeper reality of something that we're experiencing. But a further stage of Tawil would be entering into a state of what we call harmonic relationship with what we're experiencing. So now there's this interference pattern of the light back and forth, and now there's something new that's revealed in both directions, from the light of our being interacting with the light of what we're experiencing, and vice versa. So it's like these are the raw ingredients for a revelation to occur. Mm-hmm. And a revelation is not a revealing of something that was hidden and was sitting there in the arcane mysteries of the universe. It's something that's been born right by that experience. It's something fresh that has been enabled to take place.
Yeah.
So I had an idea. I get so many ideas from sometimes science or technology and see, well, how might this apply to spirituality? So what I started thinking about yesterday is hotspots. And many of you may be familiar with this. We had our last week, our internet was out all week because of the freeze in Texas, but we could use our cell phones, and most cell phones can be turned into a mobile hotspot. And what that means is they're their own little Wi-Fi network. So I was able to get on my computer and get onto the network from my cell phone. It allowed me to access what I couldn't access otherwise. So I've said before many, many times in previous classes that everything is a portal, P-O-R-T-A-L, to the sacred, potentially. And it has to do with our way of experiencing it and relating to it. Everything is a potential opening to a deeper reality, and it all has to do with our way of relating to what we're experiencing. So I thought of, well, this would be grounds for a meditation that we can sample here, but you can take as a homework assignment during the week. So close your eyes, and as Ravani Rao was saying, what we usually do with our imagination is just rerun what's already happened, or a projection of what we think the next day is going to be like, which isn't going to be likely very much different from it. But think about just today, earlier in the day, and think about times during the day when it could have been something very brief, but something could have served as a hotspot for you that opens your connection up to a deeper reality. It might be a line from a song on the radio. It might be a tree that you saw. We go for walks and we saw some really beautiful trees. With such wonderful energy. Or the other day we went for a walk at the Oso Bay wetlands, and there's no leaves on the trees and everything, but on the ground there were these beautiful little tiny flowers, and those just stood out so much. Just like a flash that enables you to open up to a deeper way of connecting. So think about something that happened earlier in the day that if you could go back in time and put aside all the other things that you had to do later today, and just that you could have hung out with that, and see if you can just imagine coming into this state of relationship with that, and let that serve as Gabriel to you. It's going to bring you an enunciation of the way that divinity is revealed through it, which is unique in the whole universe. So you're opening up. Just imagine if you knew that Gabriel was at your front door, and you open the door and Gabriel's got a message from God for you. Well, whatever you picked for this little hotspot, it's the same thing. Here comes your message from the Creator to you by means of this experience, this circumstance, this situation. And allow yourself to just open. You don't know what it's going to be, but you're just in this state of receptivity and just feeling sacredness, feeling the energy of spirit. And it doesn't have to translate into any kind of words. You're receiving a divine transmission. And you're feeling the interaction of the light from what you're experiencing with the light of your being. And now feel the light of your being having an impact on what you're experiencing, that you are also Gabriel to that which you are experiencing. And feel that divine message that's expressed through your very being, through the light of your being, in connection with this. As you continue to experience what arises from the light upon light, see if you can open up your awareness even more using the faculty of your imagination to feel how this light that's transpiring between you and what you're experiencing, this co-revelation now is opened up into the light that circulates through everything and experience in relationship with everything else. And now this experience has added something that was not there before to this symphony of light, where the notes, so to speak, are the divine qualities. The instruments are all the souls. And feel the world itself being transformed through this. Blessed and healed. And feel the transmission of all the great beings throughout time, the masters and saints and prophets, of all the spiritual traditions, but also the great beings of many fields of human knowledge, the great musicians and poets and artists and scientists. And realize that who you are, the essential identity of your being, can never be lost, no matter what state of consciousness, what subtle realm you are focalized in. And see if you can feel now a connection with what you've experienced with your manifest being, all part of yourself. We call this multimodal consciousness, being able to experience many levels of existence and many levels of consciousness simultaneously, all circulating through the oneness of who you are. And ending with a prayer of Hazrat Inayat Khan, may the heavens be reflected on the earth, Lord, that the earth may turn into heaven. Amen.
Now it's about to share with this group, everyone.